welcome to Streamers and Punches, the podcast from Sound Notion TV that looks at current events and new releases in the world of film music. My name is Bill Witham.
And I'm Kevin Wilt.
And on today's podcast, we've got some current events we're going to look at. We're going to talk about what we've been listening to lately, and we're going to interview composer Michael Price. So it's going to be really, really cool. So stay tuned for all of these things. So first up, news, events, and new things happening in the world of film music. Right away, Bear McCreary, who we've mentioned many times before. You may know him from his scores to The Walking Dead, and then before that, Battlestar Galactica. He will now be scoring the new Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. television show. For anybody that is not familiar with that, it's going to be on ABC, and it is sort of a branch off of the Marvel Comics Avengers film. And it's actually going to feature the same lead actor who played Agent, I want to say Coulson. Agent Coulson, right. And the name of the actor escapes me at the moment. But that actor will be on the show with, from what I understand, a few guest stars from the film. So you'll recognize a crossover. Anyway, so very cool. Check that out with the Bear McCreary score. We're looking forward to that. Also, the New Zealand Symphony has scrapped their tour to continue recording for the second Hobbit film, The Desolation of Smaug. So it's kind of interesting that, because Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, in the past, the orchestras being used for the Lord of the Rings scores were not New Zealand orchestras.
Yeah, that's what I found actually most interesting about this story. The original trilogy, I think, was all done with the London Symphony. I know some of the other Peter Jackson films, like when Howard Shore, I don't know if this was the case for James Newton Howard's score for King Kong, but when Howard Shore recorded his score for King Kong, they recorded with the New Zealand Symphony. But you're right. I think the first Lord of the Rings trilogy was the London Symphony. But I guess it sounds like they're using the New Zealand Symphony for Hobbit, kind of keeping everything close there, which kind of makes sense.
Now that my geek memory has caught up, I believe it was technically the London Philharmonic, because Lord of the Rings, there's a lot of fans out there. And they
might, fine. I don't want anyone angry at me. Yeah, you're right.
Well, London Symphony,
and Bill's email is Kevin Wilt.
And his new address is in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
No. Yeah. So no, it's kind of funny, though. In the article, they mentioned that there were a couple of subscription ticket holders for the New Zealand Symphony who were a little bummed that this tour got canceled.
Sure.
But all in all, most people, everyone in New Zealand, I think, is just drinking the Hobbit Kool-Aid. So I think they're more than happy to allow the orchestra to participate.
It's one of their great, and I don't mean this sarcastically, it's one of their great cultural offerings is the Tolkien adaptations, like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, to all come from New Zealand, with Weta doing the special effects and Peter Jackson, all the...
Absolutely. I want to go down to New Zealand and take the Lord of the Rings tour thing. It'd be awesome.
Anybody who flies to New Zealand is going to see this huge golem appear crawling over the one of the buildings as you get out of the plane, going to get your luggage. Unless they took it down. So you're reminded, if you ever go to New Zealand, that's the place responsible for making all the Tolkien movies. So anyway, cool. Well,
speaking of Down Under, the Doctor Who Symphonic Spectacular, which is basically a Doctor Who orchestra concert, which is awesome, is returning to Australia for a few performances in 2014. So we've got an article posted to that on our website, soundnotion.tv/SAP, and you can read composer Murray Gold talks about the process of doing this in concert form and things like that, which is very cool. I think probably maybe the least surprising, but one of the biggest headlines that we have today is...
Wait, drum roll.
John Williams has been confirmed to compose the score for the next Star Wars trilogy, which was something we had been speculating about for a long time, but it's, I guess, official now. The thing that is surprising that I don't know about you, Bill, I had not heard about and had not seen coming. We have a new John Williams film score to look forward to very soon. John Williams is scoring this film called The Book Thief, starring Jeffrey Rush and Emily Watson. It's kind of, I think, like a small independent period film kind of thing. It's coming out November 15th, so that's kind of right around the corner. And I think they're in the process or will be recording it fairly soon. This is the first time since I think 2005 that Williams has scored a film that's not a Steven Spielberg film. So this, I don't know about you. I kind of wasn't expecting a new Williams score until Star Wars. So this is a nice little surprise to pop up, I guess.
I was going to make the joke that if you've been reading any of the film blogs or Hollywood Reporter lately, you'll see that Steven Spielberg has backed out of not one, but two movies that he was scheduled to direct, produce, and adapt. I think the first one was called Robopocalypse, and the second one was American Sniper. Mm-hmm. And that the American Sniper has just been in the news as he will, I think, only produce it now, and he's removed.
I don't know, because I think
did he remove himself entirely?
I think so, because his DreamWorks, his production company, was on task to produce while he was directing. And I think both of those, he and DreamWorks, have both left, I think.
Okay. So
yeah, we don't know what Spielberg will be doing next, which means we don't know what the next John Williams Spielberg score will be. But we now know what the next John Williams score will be.
I was thinking humorously that if John Williams is just kind of sitting there tapping his fingers waiting for Spielberg to make another film, then he's kind of like, well, I'm out of luck for a while. So Steven keeps backing out of films, so I'm going to just jump on the next quality project I can find, and thus you have The Book Thief. So well done.
I don't think that's how that happened, but okay.
So if that's the case, well done, Mr. Williams. We look forward to your involvement. So if nothing else, it highlights a film that I otherwise had not even heard of. It sounds like a Harry Potter movie, or like like the 8th book or something, or the next Percy Jackson and the Book Thief. I don't know. I mean, I had no idea what the movie was. So I'll probably check it out a little bit. Speaking of John Williams, one thing I want to mention in relation to the Man of Steel score we covered on a previous podcast, David Chen from Slash Film. First of all, Slash Film is a great website, and they have it's just I'm not I'm not being paid by them or anything. I love the site. They do updates very quickly. They were right on the Doctor Who announcement on Sunday. As soon as it was announced, it was up there. And I know there's other sites that are just as good, but they're pretty no nonsense. And every contributing writer is pretty solid. And David Chen works their podcast, the Slash Film podcast, where they discuss films. And he has a particular affinity for music. I think he has a music or cello background. So on occasion, he'll discuss film scores. And last year, he did kind of a retrospective of all the Hans Zimmer scores for the Christopher Nolan Batman films. And after Man of Steel came out, he created about 11, 12-minute podcast that just details the Superman score for, rather the John Williams score for Superman the movie from 1978, sort of compared and contrasted with the Hans Zimmer score to Man of Steel, and notes sort of just similarities and differences, but also just each composer's different take and different kind of sound palette and things like that. And it's for those that just want like a 11-minute sort of casual listen, I think it works really well. He covers sort of his own take of how he interprets the material that both composers used. And he sort of disclaims at the beginning that he's not a music theorist, so he doesn't get into hardcore details. And there's it's tempting for me to listen to what he's saying and then to give him a play-by-play of, well, here's what's happening in the music that creates the sensation that you're describing emotionally, but I just haven't gotten around to it. But it's a nice listen, and so I'm glad he does it. And he may do something with the Bond music, or I think he's getting submissions from listeners to do other film score retrospectives. Anyway, if you have a chance, check it out.
They should just listen to our show instead.
Yeah, I know. He should just listen. Yeah. Well, we didn't really compare it too much with the Williams. We just sort of looked at it for what it was. But anyway, speaking of listening to scores, Kevin, since our last podcast, what have you been listening to?
Haven't been listening to a whole lot with the whole moving cross country thing and all that kind of stuff. But you and I, Bill,
Kevin lives in Florida now, by the way.
I live in Florida now, sunny Florida, as opposed to not sunny Michigan.
So I noticed even your beard has a tan now.
Yeah. So I've been a little bit busy, but Bill, you and I both listened to one of the newer scores to come out, Marco Beltrami's score to the Wolverine, which is the new Hugh Jackman X-Men spin-off, whatever you want to call it, movie. Yeah. Which I've got to say, it was. I was sort of expecting that score to be, it's a big $100 million action movie, and I was expecting the score to be sound like a big generic $100 million whatever dollar action movie score. And it wasn't, which I found really kind of refreshing. It didn't.
Were you pleasantly surprised?
I was pleasantly surprised because it had kind of its own voice. It sounded like, not that it was, I wouldn't say it's self-referential, but it sounded as if it was a specific score to a specific movie and wasn't just a blanket action score that you could throw on top of any action movie, which I found really, really refreshing. There's been a lot written about the kind of dearth of $100 million, $200 million action movies this summer, and how so many of them are losing money. That I sort of expected this to fall into the same category, but it didn't, which was kind of nice.
I want to just echo the same thing you just said. I mean, I listened to it first, and then I did see the movie. And first of all, for anybody that's jaded at this point in the summer about the big blockbuster movies, Wolverine, hands down, if you compare it to Man of Steel and Iron Man 3, which Iron Man 3 feels so long ago at this point. Maybe that's just me, but
yeah.
And I don't. April, wasn't it?
I think
April.
May.
I think it's definitely before Memorial Day. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if was there another comic book movie? Am I missing one? That's it, right? Iron Man 3 and Man of Steel, and then the Wolverine.
Star Trek was in there.
Yeah, but
and it's not a comic movie, but I'm just thinking of other big action movies.
I was just literally superhero films. Of the three, wow. I mean, this one was It had all the things that you wanted. I wanted more from Man of Steel. Like Man of Steel was going towards it, but it just never got there with like character stuff and having loud moments balanced with quiet moments. So on a film level, like I really highly recommend the Wolverine. I mean, James Mangold was a director, and it's like, wow. So here's this guy. He's not got this huge name, but boy, can he deliver. He knows how to pace a movie and how to make you you buy it when a character likes another character and their emotions grow slowly towards a character. It's not forced. It comes naturally. And it was just, it's great. But also Wolverine is a different character than Superman or Iron Man. He doesn't have quite the humor of Iron Man or this, I guess, they sort of make it a tragic...
The sanctimony of Superman?
Yeah.
Well, no, I like Superman. Supes is cool, but Wolverine, they definitely get across like the pain that he has to endure.
Did you just say Soups?
I did.
I did.
Call them Soups.
Okay,
Soups.
I just want to make that clear.
That's a common nickname for Superman. Anyway,
for his close personal friends,
his friends call him Soups.
No, they call him Cal, I guess. I don't know, but anyway, nerd alert. But Wolverine was like a really well-made film, and there's some issues. It gets very comic booky near the end, but at that point, it's built up enough goodwill from a storytelling standpoint, and the score works really well in the film. A lot of unique percussion, a lot of great rhythmic cues that just highlight the action, and it's like they come about it by achieving the same thing that other scores achieve, which is to heighten the drama and to create like a cool musical accompaniment to go with the physical action that you're seeing, right? But it arrives at it from a different choice of instrumentation, and just like Kevin said, it doesn't sound like a generic, you could put this score on anything. It sounds like it was written for this film. So kudos to Marco Beltrami. There's one drawback, I would say, that although there's some music that is brought back, you hear this type of music here, and then you hear it a little bit later. For a film that's about a central character as memorable as Wolverine, I didn't notice an outright theme that was strongly presented and memorable to sort of match the character. But the music, if there could ever be a case made for, like a non-thematic score that did its job really well, this would be it. So anyway, it gets a really high recommendation.
So what do you? I was asking Kevin this, and I haven't seen the film, and I have not listened to the album. What is so cool and unique? You say it's like cool and unique, but like how? Like, tell me what you're talking about.
Um, the color choices, instrumentation, don't sound like something I've already heard in this summer's action scores or previous ones. It doesn't sound as like when you listen to Hans Zimmer, for example, not to pick on him, but he has a sound that's very much imitated.
No, we've got 53 other episodes for that.
Yeah.
Right. It's in some cases just boils down to I want to achieve the same thing, but just go about it a different way. So I look at some of the instrumentation as the means to that end. And in the case of the Beltrami score for Wolverine, I think he just chooses some more unique, colorful percussion instrumentation. It's not as gushy or Hollywood. It's not as on the nose when he comes out to make an emotional statement in the music. It's there. It's got an emotional component, but it's not beating you over the head with it. It's, in fact, some of the scenes that have to play to a soothing or sort of a warmer type of emotion as opposed to the action do so in a very subtle way, like very low-key strings or other sustained instruments, and used in a way that in other movies this year or in the past several summers are typically done really like very strongly, very sort of, it's like overcooked. They're just lots of doublings and everything is playing together. And I didn't notice that. It's almost it almost just sounded like he just assembled a room full of musicians and had them, well, I don't know how else to say it. It's like it just sounds, it's got kind of a more unique, fresh take based on how the cues are written, how they're orchestrated, and it just doesn't have a bloated sound to it. If there's an analog to digital kind of comparison, fine or whatever, but it just sounds more unique and more singular and more like everyone's contribution is important and not that whatever you play here is fine, we'll just add a bunch of stuff to it in post and cover it all up. It doesn't sound like that. I don't know if that helps. But anyway, so while I say lots of good things about Wolverine, I almost forgot at this point that I've seen Pacific Rim. And I'll just say a quick word about that. I saw it. And I don't really want to talk about the movie too much. You either like giant robots fighting giant alien monsters or you don't. And if you do, you'll like the film. But Raymond Djawadi did the score for Pacific Rim. And I was saying that, I'm making certain assumptions going into it. But I'll listen to it and I'll watch how it works in the film. But the film was pretty loud. I did see it in IMAX 3D. So it was an assault on the senses from beginning to end. And that was how it was intended to be viewed. And I only heard Raymond Djawadi's score when the music would swell as it led up to something. And the rest of the time, it was just sort of part of the mix. And there was never anything that was particularly memorable. There was nothing memorable about it to me. It was mostly just chords and rhythms, and in no way was there anything different about it than, so it's in many ways it's like the antithesis of everything I just described about Beltrami's score to Wolverine. So it's like a summer action score, but done in almost the most conventional way. So anyway, that's, sorry for the Raymond Djawadi fans, but I just didn't get anything out of it. Anyway, but Wolverine's great. I recommend it, both the film and the score. Check it out if you get a chance, and that's awesome. New CD releases, not so much, so we'll sort of leave that portion out. Not anything much to cover there. Kevin, anything else?
No, I don't think so. So earlier today, we were very fortunate to be able to interview composer Michael Price. We talked a little bit about his work on the BBC series Sherlock, including not only the upcoming season 3, but the previous 2 seasons. And there are a few spoilers, so if you haven't seen the first 2 seasons yet, just a heads up. So here you go. Check it out. All right, so we are here with a very special guest today. We have composer Michael Price. Perhaps, at least to us, I think most famous for his work on the BBC Sherlock series, which we are very, very excited to talk to him about, as well as been music editor on the Lord of the Rings trilogy and has all sorts of other credits.
Hot Fuzz.
Hot Fuzz, which is another movie we're big fans of. So, Michael, thank you so much for being here, first of all.
Pleasure. Very great. Very nice.
Um,
Nice to do it by Skype. Very good technology.
Yeah, it's we're living in the future here. It's pretty great. So I think we definitely want to take some time, I think a little bit later on, to talk about some of your other projects and other things that you've done. But why don't we just kind of get started a little bit? Since I believe you're either like right in the middle of recording the music for the third series of Sherlock, or maybe just finished up or something. Can you? So maybe let's start with that.
Yeah.
How can you maybe just tell us a little bit about how you got involved with that series from the beginning and that kind of thing?
I think most composers, and as composers yourselves, I'm sure you found this, there is no point having a master plan, as everything is random. And so the start of Sherlock was as random as everything else. I'd known David Arnold for 10 years before that. We've worked together on all kinds of things. And we work in some of the same studios, and we're part of the same kind of crowd, really, in London. I'd helped him out on a few of the bits and pieces, and all kinds of different film projects, really, over the years in various capacities, doing some programming and then some additional music. And so David and I became this slightly unlikely Holmes and Watson duo ourselves, and just sort of did. We just basically, whenever either of us got a phone call about something that seemed in any way interesting, we'd have a look at it. And David had known Mark Gatiss, who's one of the co-creators of Sherlock, for an awfully long time before. And there was actually, at the pilot stage, there was another composer attached to the project, but as part of the reinvention of the BBC's concept of Sherlock, or certainly Stephen Moffat's concept, they made a 60-minute pilot episode, and then thought they could squeeze some more juice out of it. So we got a call, and Paul McGuigan got a call to come and direct 2 of the first 3 episodes, and the first season of Sherlock was born. And it was very much sort of, nobody was kind of into it to begin with. The various head executives of the BBC have went on record at the time saying this is a pointless program, nobody would ever watch it. It was all in the same way that they said the same about the Beatles and everything. Mm-hmm. There's always some executive somewhere with egg on their face,
right?
In this case too. But it's literally sort of being in the middle of a sort of a creative environment that takes off and slightly combusts, because there was just something about this particular combination of the great acting, great writing, Paul McGuigan's concept for the direction of certainly the first 2 seasons, and David and I just tried really hard to not be rubbish, not spoil it really, and that kind of, I think sometimes in hindsight it's easy to give yourselves higher motives or more foresight than you really had, but as usual we just sort of bumbled along and did what we could at the time, and but then it's turned into a show that I think even more so than my time as an elf on Lord of the Rings, to be part of a project which has got so much under the skin, and so many people actively love the show is an interesting and privileged position to be in, really. Yeah, it's about that.
All right, very cool. You had mentioned working David Arnold a little bit. Can you talk about the process of collaborating with another composer on a TV series? Yeah,
for sure. It's sort of I think a lot of it is about complementary personalities, and much more really about amateur psychology in composing the film than almost about the notes themselves, because what David and I found when we first worked together was that we could exchange ideas in a sort of a non-confrontational way, and we found that we could spend quite a lot of time with each other, and somebody going, I don't really like that sound, I think it would be cooler if it was like this, without the other one going, I think you're an arsehole, get out of the room. It's sort of your natural reaction when somebody criticizes you. But if you don't take it as criticism. So we found over this long period of time, including the Bond movies, Narnia and Hot Fuzz and Paul, and a bunch of stuff, that we could work together. So now it's sort of, literally, neither of us are quite sure where the joins are on a project like Sherlock, because sometimes we'll be asked, who wrote which cue or who wrote what tune, and it's something that we make a determined effort not to do either ourselves or or to a certain extent in public, because it's sort of we kind of see it a bit like being in a band. It's like a slightly middle-aged band of old, but it's the closest I'm ever going to get to being in a cool band, because there's that sense of sort of like, we all know that Paul McCartney probably wrote those bits of those Beatles songs, and we all probably know that Lennon almost certainly did those. But you kind of don't want to pick the wings off the butterfly. Yeah. So practically speaking, we both write in Logic. We both swap sequences. We swap tunes. We swap MP3s. I work about half an hour. My writing room's about half an hour away from David's. We'll sing down the phone to each other. We'll give each other notes on cues that have originated from each other's place. But more than anything, it's kind of it's a sort of, I think it's a really positive example of relinquishing slightly your control of authorship of something. So I think in film music in general, that there are positive ways of having group authorship, and there are more negative ways of doing it. And I think that in a positive way, if you get 2 or 3 people working together whose opinions, the result is more than the sum of the parts, then I think it can be really great. I do think there are other ways of working collaboratively when it tends to smooth itself out, where nobody wants to take a chance because everybody's second guessing somebody else's opinion, and so they kind of it becomes the sort of denomination goes down. But we hope when we're working together that actually we push each other to do something different. So if I do something that's a bit samey that I've done before, David will raise a wry eyebrow and go, see, gone for the white note A minor chord with a little dissonance on the top once more. Well done. And so just with that kind of healthy, humorous competition.
Yeah.
I was wondering, Michael, since there's a very unique sound to the cues and the music that's used in Sherlock, was that also through collaboration, or I think it sounds sort of, at times there's some electronics, but I hear like harpsichord mixed with, well, it's very energetic. It's very always sort of moving along, especially the way it's used on the show. There's nice use of transitions, establishing shots. And I just wondered if that was, just through lots of experimenting you came up with the sound, or was it relatively a quick discovery? Or
it's a really good question, actually, and particularly in the context of the two of us, in that I think it's the particular combination of sounds on Sherlock are a bit of a collision between things that David and I both like, and some things that I like, and some things that are more common to him. A lot of the sort of tinkly sounds and the kind of twanky top end sounds are the result of stuff we've done over the years. So we'd actually done a show for Mark Gatiss before called The Crooked House, which is just a BBC 4 little horror thing David and I did quite quickly for him, which had Cymbalum or Chimbalum, depending on your pronunciation, which is then also featured in Hans Zimmer's Sherlock Holmes score himself.
Right.
But weirdly, we'd used it and used a real player on the Crooked House score, but then we didn't actually use that on our Sherlock score. We used a plucked auto harp, which we'd been using a lot as well, and we'd used for sort of like 4 or 5 years. But that sounds a lot in a mix, like a cimbalum. And if you put that with mandolins, because we've got a lot of hit mandolins in ours. So there's a sort of a very distinctive Sherlock sound, which is sort of like a kind of bouncing ball where they go ding, 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 ding. And that's actually a ballpoint pen on the string of a mandolin, played by Rael Jones, one of our collaborators and geniuses. So it's sort of it's funny because there are a lot of sounds in that sound world, and lots of ways of generating that. Some come off like a harpsichord, or like or like a mandolin, or like any of these kind of things. And the great thing about them is that I think that sound world takes you back to the Persuaders and John Barry in the 1960s and those sort of 60s and 70s great old school TV theme tunes. Also, they're sort of non-specific enough to sort of give you energy and character, but not tie you down to a very particular thing. And they work on telly as well. They're bright. They've got energy. They bounce through a laptop screen. You know, they do all the stuff that, you know, it's lovely when you're working on movies and you can assume that everybody's going to be sat in a darkened cinema in 5.1 with a huge sound system. But I think taking on the challenge of making stuff that sounds great on catch-up on people's laptops is something that we've kind of got to take on the chin and be involved with, really.
No, it does cut through really well. I've watched Sherlock at my parents' house to try to convince them to watch the show.
Good work. Very good.
And they said, you know, they live in North Carolina, so my parents said they had a hard time understanding everyone's accents. and I said, you just need to turn it up louder. But every time...
How are other people at understanding your parents' accents?
Yeah.
Well, no, they're pretty dialect neutral or just accent neutral, but every time I've seen it either on my computer or on a television or at my parents' house, the mix was always really good. The choice of instruments cut really well. But now that makes me think of another thing. Knowing that it's Sherlock Holmes, was there a conscious choice to avoid the violin, or to bring it in? Because the sounds that we're talking about are actually the sounds that are more closer in my memory of season 1 and season 2.
Yeah.
And I have to think, well, you've seen Benedict Cumberbatch playing violin a couple times, but anyway, I'll let you answer that. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
It's funny because it obviously is the elephant in the room when anybody's doing anything about Sherlock, the violin elephant, and you kind of we thought about it, and if one goes through, I'm sure all our computers are the same. If you go to any of your projects and then look back through version 13, 15, 17, 23, you'll probably find almost one of everything. And you know, there are we David and I did consider the main titles having a specifically violin-y element, but nothing worked for us. It just all felt a bit kind of on the nose. And so it's interesting because in season 2, the violin really becomes a much more personal thing, because for the first time you see Sherlock not just playing but writing a tune. And so he composes on screen for the woman, for Irene Adler. And again, you know, we hadn't planned this, but we hadn't used the solo violin very much in season 1. But we're so pleased when we saw the scripts and saw the show for season 2, because here was a justified story reason to use it. And so then it felt like we'd been terribly smart and held back for this moment, and just kind of, you know, we had such great taste. But the reality was it just now it made sense. So episode 1 of season 2, you'll hear that the violin, the theme that Sherlock plays by the window when he's sort of writing it, is then woven into the big theme, the woman theme that plays over the Sherlock's reveal of the mobile phone code. That's a big spoiler if anybody's not seen the show.
We'll put a warning.
It's been on Netflix. It's been fun. And then right at the end of the show, there's a little violin quote, a little quote of a figure. And then it became something just to be the violin texture, just to be brought out at moments of real sort of pathos or real emotion. So there's a tiny little fragment at the end of Reichenbach when Sherlock is on the ground, covered in blood, and you think it's all over. There's a sort of searing atonal string piece. And just when metaphorically, his soul seems to be leaving his body, you hear a little violin figure just lift you up and lift you out. But we're hoping it's operating more on that level than it's Sherlock Holmes, there's a violin and a pipe and a deerstalker hat.
I mean, the violin seems like one of those iconic Sherlock Holmes things that, because this series takes place in modern day, they've kind of gotten rid of. You know, there are no top hats and handsome cabs and that kind of stuff. It seems like it was smart to let the violin go with those things.
I think so. I
Yeah.
think
But he did wear the hat in the old.
he does in a very postmodern, ironic way.
Right.
I think what they call it, Hatman and Robin in
Oh, yeah.
the newspaper clipping.
Promote all those subheadings and the headlines. Smart. Very smart.
Now I'm curious. After you have been working on the show for a while, can you go watch the Robert Downey Jr. Hans Zimmer movies and enjoy them completely as a separate experience? Or are you looking at it like, we would have handled this differently? Or
literally, and this sounds like the sort of thing people say on interviews, and it isn't true, but this is true. I have not seen any. I haven't seen, because there's two, isn't there? There's two out, and
yes. Yeah.
I made a choice not to watch them just because it's sort of not because I don't think they'll be great. I love everybody involved with all those films. I think it would be smart, and perhaps when we finished ours, I could kind of kick back with a nice glass of wine and just watch theirs straight through. But I think there's something sort of, I mean, again, we can all talk freely as composers. We all know that we swim in a sea of temp scores and other people's music and directors and producers pushing you towards certain things. And if any of us have ever done commercials, then you know it becomes a sort of a little bit of your soul dies every time somebody kind of goes, oh, could it sound a bit more like the Temps? And no.
Yeah.
Awful. Well, we all actually there was an amazing interview, a print interview I saw with John Powell a couple of 6 months ago, something like that, where he was very wonderfully direct about some of the stuff that we all face in terms of we're not writing music in a vacuum, but I think within that you then have your own little ways of kind of holding on to the thing that you think makes you, or not even as self-conscious as that, you're just kind of holding on to doing your thing. And so, there'd be times in all kinds of places where people refer you to other stuff, or, and sometimes that can be, I produced a film over Christmas with my partner, who's Tammy, who's a writer-director. And so I was in a position where I could have fired myself, and which I would have looked forward to as a producer. But we actually, even though I had complete control over the musical process, Tammy and I did listen to other bits and pieces to give ourselves a shared language, because I think if you're dealing with people who are not composers and don't have a musical language, it's much easier for them to go, could it be less twinkly than that, but more sad than that, and to have points of reference.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for everybody, swimming in the sea of all our colleagues' work, but retaining a spark of what you do yourself, I think is pretty much all we've got to do, really. Most important thing.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, just don't take any licks out of Mozart's Don Giovanni and add heavy horns and percussion to them in your next season of Sherlock, and you'll be good, because then no one will lifting anything from the Game of Shadows movie score. So
Right.
we covered that. I think, I don't know how many episodes back it was, but we were just looking at how there was a nice thing that Hans Zimmer did by combining some opera with the Hans Zimmer sound.
Yes.
And it was in the midst of a sort of a large action montage. But anyway, so if we hear that in your next season,
yeah, you'll know exactly where it's come from. Right.
then I'll say I was responsible for that. No.
I'll send my lawyer's bill to you for when.
Right.
It's fun. I mean, I've worked with Hans before. I've been, part of the thing about being lucky enough to have been a music editor for a bunch of years is that I worked with, some terrific composers right at the top of their game, and genuinely, without exception, there was something magnificent and special about all of them. They're not always the easiest people to be in a room with for a long period of time, but there was something unique and great. And I was a very minor elf on the on Da Vinci Code for a couple of weeks with Hans on the sessions, and they man, that guy's got some chops. He's smart, and he reads a film incredibly well. And I find it's always interesting with I was going to say I don't try not to read the internet. Clearly, that's not true. There are very some things that you can read, but in general, it's sort of I find that most composers are incredibly supportive of each other and of each other's work, because we all know how incredibly difficult it is to get anything on the screen, and just to get just get through the day is tough enough. So I'm a big Hans fan. I love his stuff, and the intelligent way that he sort of reinvents things. I might not like every note he's ever written, but I don't like every note I've ever written, so it's not a problem.
Well, not to have too much of a tangent about him, but I found myself defending his approach to the Man of Steel score, because a lot of people were expecting or wanted, I think, a large orchestral, almost Wagnerian leitmotif approach. Sure. And he had a more sort of esoteric, in some instances, more austere. And I really was, to me, it was a very refreshing, a welcome change. And I thought it was kind of bold in a lot of ways. And I hope he can kind of build on that in the future Superman movies, but we'll see.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, this is about you. I didn't want to spend any time talking about him.
Interesting, seminal stuff.
Hey, Kevin, let's have him show us his gear.
Oh yeah. So
we're on a studio tour here.
So this is I'm in my little writing room. I'm lucky enough to have. I've got sort of a studio at home, which is sort of a mixed room in 5.1 and those kind of things. But I'd recently moved into a little writing room with toys in. So I did promise that I'd really inexpertly guide you around them. So this is my new favorite thing, which is my guitar pedal board. Oh my god! So this basically, like, slightly, is a bunch of little toys and little pedals, all of which are connected through something just about over there. You want to see that black thing with loads of knobs on over there? That's a thermionic culture Fat Bustard, which is a Valve premixer, which is the best thing in the entire universe ever. All the screens and stuff are over there. So I use Logic and Pro Tools like everybody else, write in Logic and mix in Pro Tools. But this new synth rig is the best thing, because so basically I can play any of the synths, like the Juno and the little Moog thing, and there's a bunch of cool synths on the iPad now, which sound great if you get a good quality audio interface. So I've got the iPad playing through the little Apogee Duet, and then coming out into the Fat Bustard. U is important, clearly there. And so that gives it a bit of valve warmth, and then that goes into Logic. And it also simultaneously goes through all the guitar effects pedals as well, and then goes back into Logic too. So I just got really bored with soft synths. They suck. They just really do. And weirdly, they suck most in TV, because I think back to what we're talking about making sounds that work on laptops and small screens. I think that the thing with soft synths, in massive generalization, but is that they don't really have any true sort of. I'm just plugging myself back in here, not really making a strange move towards the screen. They don't really have any true warmth in terms of, I think, the distortion and harmonics and things like that. They tend to fizz very quickly for me. And when they've got bass, it's bass, below 100 hertz that sounds impressive to begin with, but just doesn't carry all the way through the process. So we make Sherlock on an analog desk, on an SSL, and then we're doing it slightly differently this year, but we make sure that it definitely, we put as many real instruments on as we can and keep it kind of as analog as we can. Not just for, sort of esoteric tweakiness' sake, but because genuinely I think something happens in that sort of 100 to 250 hertz region that then sits in a more pleasing way all the way through the process, so that if somebody's watching it on catch up on Netflix or an iPlayer or something like that on a little laptop, then they still have a sense of some of the warmth, and also it's more fun. Yay! Playing with guitar pedals, that's an afternoon, just gone right there. Great.
And then you had could you show us that little device you showed us earlier?
Oh, yeah.
For the
the Teenage Engineering OP1. This is just the best thing in the entire world for. It's a synth and a drum machine and a 4-track tape recorder and an FM radio as well. If you want to hear the cricket results and those sort of things. But basically, it looks like a little toy. It's neither is it priced like a toy nor feels like a toy because it's much more expensive than you think it would be. But so look at the little tape thing going around there. It is just without question the most awesome thing because I think we're sort of, I don't know, it's really easy to get a bunch of loops from I don't know, one of those libraries that we all buy, and we're all having to go really fast all the time, and again there's stylus loops in some of my things, and I always flinch slightly, but they're in there. But if you've got the time and it doesn't take that much longer. What I do now is if I know I've got an action cue or something or a weirdie cue at like 92 BPM or something like that, I just take this little beast on the train with me when I'm going into the centre of London and set it to 92 BPM, make some madness, just throw that in, and then some of it works, some of it doesn't. But at least you've got some stuff on there which is kind of fun and cool. So for season 3 of Sherlock, there's definitely some stuff that sounds like all the other things, but there's some insanity in there as well. Some audio insanity. Very exciting.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm tempted to ask questions about season 3, but the Sherlock fan in me doesn't want to hear any of the answers. Yeah. So I think I'm going to hold off.
Exactly.
It'll take another year before we get it over here in BBC.
That's right. There's always this huge delay in the States. I'm not sure why.
They just torture us, especially as Benedict Cumberbatch becomes more of a Hollywood star. We get to wait longer and longer before the new Sherlock season.
You guys.
Right.
So, any chance you could ever score a Doctor Who episode?
Well, yeah. we are all mates, actually, because Murray works down at Air Studios as well. And the... he's another fine writer, and we joke about people swapping hats every now and again, and maybe David and I go and do a Doctor Who, and Murray could come and do a Sherlock.
That's a perfectly good trade-off. Murray would. It's Murray Gold, I believe. Is that right?
It is, yeah.
And he would do an episode of Sherlock, and you guys would go over and do an episode of Doctor Who.
Doctor Who. There is a new Doctor Who. Maybe it's time for a change.
Yeah, there you go.
Perfect justification right there.
I think so. We're incredibly lucky because it's really sort of down to Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss and this sort of little pool of creative gods that we have walking amongst us at the moment that can just make great, entertaining TV. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of, and actually, even though my background really is a film background rather than a TV one, I'm loving TV right now. I think TV is a great place to be for composers. I think that the quality of the work that's being made from Breaking Bad, all the kind of HBO stuff, all the the Netflix original series, and the way in which people are consuming their media now, it's like binge watching 10 episodes at a time, which is what I tend to do. I think it's a really, interesting time to try and find great musical ways of engaging people as they watch these new stories, because I don't think that the old ways, like you're saying about a kind of a traditional John Williams score approach to a 90-minute movie, I'm just not sure that's relevant to 13 hours of The Wire. Mm-hmm. It's sort of, these are different animals, and I think they need composers to go out on a limb and try and discover some new musical aesthetics that will work in a different way for them. I mean, Sherlock is now, when we've done this set of 3, will be the equivalent of 9 films. I mean, they're 90-minute episodes, and they're BBC 90 minutes. There's no commercial breaks over here, so they are, literally are feature films. And so the sort of the aesthetic choices you have to make for how you develop themes and when you recall things and what you can expect an audience to remember and what you can't. I think are fascinating in TV right now. I think it's a great place to be.
So aside from, we mentioned that right now you're recording season 3 of Sherlock. What else do you have coming up next that you're working on?
Very busy, very, very important and very busy. I've actually got I got some really fun things actually. A very good friend of mine who's a director in Australia is making a 3-part period drama, 1850s America, called Tell the World, which will be a 3-hour thing. So again, it's this sort of slightly TV miniseries format. I'm recording an album, yay, for Erased Tapes, who are a wonderful little boutique record label based in Berlin and London. And I did a little EP of string quartets for them last year, which came out on vinyl, which made me very happy. So we're doing an actual album right now, which hopefully will gig in the new year. What else am I doing? There's a comedy show called Big School for BBC One, which David and I have just done, which airs in the UK in a week's time. So that's 6 episodes of that. There's lots of jolly stuff. There might even be a film about a dog. I've got a dinner tonight to talk about it. That's all. All about that one. Yeah, happy time.
All right, very cool. Well, we look forward to hearing all those things. We of course look forward to Sherlock Series 3 whenever it shows up on this side of the pond. Thank you again, Michael, for being here with us. It's been a pleasure. We'll let you go because I know you're just about out of time here. But thanks again.
Great to speak to you guys anyway, and best of luck with the rest of the podcast.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
So thanks again, Michael, for the interview. It was awesome. We had a really fun time talking with you. You can check out Sherlock Season 3 on BBC America whenever it comes to America, which might be a little...
No, I think it'll probably be on PBS in like 9 months or whatever ungodly amount of time. But
okay.
Or actually on the BBC if you live.
Or if you're in the UK, you can watch it on BBC in like November, which makes me kind of jealous. But anyway.
Okay, so see it however you can and enjoy it. So that will do it for this week's episode, or this month's episode of Streamers and Punches. You can listen to us on soundnotion.tv/SAP, where you can subscribe to our show, leave comments, and find links to the music we spoke about. You can also subscribe to our show through iTunes. So we're going to leave with one cue that Michael Price composed called Pursuit, and this is from Season 1 or Series 1 of Sherlock. My name is Bill Witham.
And I'm Kevin Will.
And thank you for listening.